Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you for watching yet another episode of Crypto Hot Seat. Today we are joined by Andrei Poliakov. He is the CEO and co-founder of Coinberry, a large crypto exchange based in Canada. Andrei, thank you for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's jump right into talk of regulation. I'm very curious about what laws you have to follow in Canada that you might not have to follow if your company was based in the US. What's the difference between Canadian and American crypto regulations?
I think the biggest difference just off the bat is the fact that in the US you guys have a federal body that encompasses your platforms across the entire nation, whereas in Canada we have provincial regulators. So we have the Ontario Securities Commission, for example, which is the regulator based in Ontario in Canada, where we are based as a team. But then we have provincial regulators. We have the British Columbia Securities Commission, you have the Alberta Securities Commission, and all across the nation. So whereas you guys have one sort of body that governs everything, we have the fortune of having to have everybody be on board with the decision that's being made. So I hope to share a bit of that process with you during this discussion, and ultimately shed some light on wonders of Canadian regulations.
Can you make that a little more clearer? Because it sounds like you're saying in the US we only have to stick to one set of rules, but it sounds like in Canada you have several sets of people you have to keep happy. Is that correct, or have I missed something?
So, in the US, you guys have FinCEN and you have the SEC, right? So it's not like there's one set of rules per se that you have. I mean, you do have various regulatory bodies that, platform must adhere to. So that's similar in Canada as well. For example, we have FinTrack, which is very similar to your FinCEN. And then we have the security commissions, which are in essence similar to the SEC. The difference is that we have each province and territory in Canada has their own securities commission. And the Ontario Securities Commission, we refer to as the OSC, just as an acronym, is the security commission that governs or that regulates the industry within the province of Ontario. All of the members of all the security commissions in Canada for all the provinces together make up a body which is known as the Canadian Securities Administrators. And basically, it's a roundtable where all the commissions come and sit and take decisions. But ultimately, at the end of the day, platforms such as ours went, and I'll walk you through sort of what our journey was, but just to summarize, yes, because we are based in Ontario, we engaged with the Ontario Securities Commission, and we started our sort of regulatory journey, and our application was filed with the Ontario Securities Commission. And then once the Ontario Securities Commission was comfortable to bring us to the CSA, that's what they did. And so then we presented our business model and we discussed, our application with all of the CSA members, meaning all of the commissions for all the provinces and territories in Canada. And then we had to basically have each one of those get on board with the decision that the Ontario Securities Commission put out, which is, to grant us registered status. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they could have opted out. They do have that flexibility to say, we don't feel comfortable with any platform, Coinberry, for example, to actually provide their services in our province, which I'm very happy to say none of them did. So all of the provinces and territories in Canada signed on to the decision granted to us by the Ontario Securities Commission, and so our platform is able to provide our services across Canada, coast to coast.
I have a suspicion that the answer to this next question is yes, but I'd love any color that you could offer. Within the realm of Canadian crypto regulation, I imagine that there are some regulators who are very excited about it, very pro crypto, but then there must be a spectrum with people at the other end saying, no, this is bad news. We have to regulate it like crazy, make it difficult to run a business legally here. Is that true? Have I described that accurately?
I wouldn't say that their goal is to make it difficult to run a business in their province. I think we have to take a step back, and ultimately, when we started Coinberry back in 2017, our goal was to provide for very easy to use, very intuitive, platform that even our grandparents could use to have access to, what we believe to be one of the most exciting and innovative, technological advancements in the financial industry, probably of our generation. And so we thought, we sat back and we thought, okay, so we have we have Bitcoin at the time, Ethereum. You didn't have any of the DeFi projects yet, but let's just focus on Bitcoin and Ethereum. And we thought to ourselves, how do we make it such that regular Canadians actually can get exposure and access to Bitcoin and ETH in a very safe and secure manner? Because back then, it was very inconvenient to actually sign up on a platform. It was practically impossible to get into this space. And so we saw an opportunity. We said, how do we do this? But at the same time, how do we do this in a manner which is sustainable, which is secure, which is safe, which is convenient? And so we chose, from day one, sort of our roadmap to be fully in line with regulatory requirements. And we were one of the first platforms to actually get registered with FinTrack, which, as I mentioned, is like your equivalent of FinCEN. And then about 3 years ago, we were probably one of the first platforms, if not the first one, to actually approach the OSC, the Ontario Securities Commission, and start a dialogue with them, start a discussion back before I think anybody even formulated any positions, at the regulators level in terms of whether registration is required or not. And so, over the course of the last 3.5 years, we've had multiple discussions with them to get them comfortable with our business, to walk them through our policies and our procedures and our safeguards and our insurances that we have in place, all of which were put in place and all of which was developed keeping investor interest in mind, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're focused on, is to make sure that when people invest with us and they buy their coin with us, they can feel safe and secure knowing that we've got regulatory approval ultimately and regulatory oversight. So I think it's important not to demonize regulators too much, even though sometimes with what's happening south of the border for us, between some of the lawsuits that the SEC is getting involved with. I may have my own opinion, but ultimately it's important to keep in mind, at least in as it pertains to the securities commissioners in Canada, who we have had multiple dialogues and a lot of discussions. I'm very confident in saying that investor interest and making sure that investor assets and investments are safe and are kept safe and secure is sort of what's at the heart of what they're trying to achieve, and which aligns perfectly well with what we're trying to achieve in providing a safe, secure, and convenient platform, right? So I think it's important to just make sure that there's a balance between regulatory oversight and making sure that innovation isn't stifled, and innovation in our industry, which is obviously very important in nascent industries, is allowed to continue to flourish without being sort of overburdened with regulatory requirements. But again, I think it's important to strike that balance. It's
right.
Tipping that scale on either way isn't good for anybody, to be honest with you.
Sure. What do you make? I mean, I can only imagine that you're paying a lot of attention to the regulatory environment in America, even though you have to follow Canadian rules. But what do you make of this situation between Coinbase and the SEC? It feels very much like a standoff right now. There's only, if I'm following it correctly, there's only the threat of a lawsuit right now. There is no actual lawsuit yet.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to note a couple of things. So first of all, Coinberry functions exactly the same as Coinbase does, right? So we're a brokerage, and at the end of the day, what both platforms, I'll talk about ourselves. What we offer is when you buy Bitcoin, for example, or any crypto asset on Coinberry, and you keep it on the platform, what you're in essence buying is a contract for delivery, right? It's a contract from Coinberry that says when you want to withdraw that Bitcoin, we will deliver it to you, right? So that in itself, that contract is a form of security, which is why we have to register as a registered broker, right? The underlying asset itself is arguably not a security at all. Bitcoin is not a security in its nature, right? But the contract for delivery we're offering is. So now you have this question of, okay, so Coinbase, or let's say Coinberry, wants to lend out that Bitcoin and earn interest in it and share it with our users. Is that activity registrable as an activity? Obviously the SEC is saying it is. Coinbase is saying it's not. I think it's important to have platforms such as Coinbase push the envelope and make the SEC and the regulators sort of question their position and really, at the end of the day, make sure that the industry as a whole is able to deliver innovative products. And that's what we are doing as well over here in Canada, and working with the securities commissions and being, the first pure play crypto platform in Canada to actually become registered, is having that dialogue that will then allow us to launch and bring to the market innovative products that users and investors need and ultimately deserve to have access to. But I think the way that sort of it's playing out in the States, where Coinbase basically went to the SEC and said, "Hey, we want to do this." The SEC said, "Please don't," and then they said, "Well, we're going to do it anyway," because they actually followed through what actually happened. That's kind of what happened. They after the SEC said, "Oh, we're not fine with this," Coinbase published sort of this statement saying, "We're gonna start a short list of users that want to have access to this lending product, and we'll be launching it in October." And so then the SEC, weised the stakes and said, "Well, we're going to sue you in that case." So we'll see what happens, but I think it's a bit of everybody swinging, and seeing who's the biggest in the room, so to speak. And I'm very interested to see how that will play out. I mean, there's only so many battles the SEC can take on, right? At the same time with the crypto industry, I mean, already,
right. At the same
full
time,
battle mode with Ripple, and it's
Sure. But at the same time, it seems like they are gearing up for exactly that fight. We have what's his name, Chairman Gensler, who's figuratively, putting on bulletproof vests and saying, "We're coming for you." These are not the words he's using, but that's the tone that I'm detecting.
Right.
I don't know what you think of that.
Well, I mean, look, again, my position is very clear in that there is a very large benefit from regulatory oversight. In that it provides safety and security to the community, to the industry, and ultimately to the end investor. Because you guys have had perhaps not as many stories as we have had here in Canada, but we've had some episodes of platforms folding and people losing their investments. Okay, and so we're coming from a little more of a being burned at the stove sort of perspective at these things. And so again, my position is that some level of regulatory oversight is needed, and at the end of the day is to the benefit of the end investor. What is very important is to make sure that it is done in a very constrained manner, such that innovation isn't stifled. So you don't have companies leaving countries because it's impossible to register, or you don't have companies not being able to provide innovative products because the commission, the SEC or perhaps the commissions in Ontario and Canada aren't able to come to the table and say, okay, we have an industry which is here to stay. We have a technology which is revolutionary, which is phenomenal, which brings fundamentally allows individuals to own and control the creation of their own wealth, by having access to crypto. And so we need to be able to continue pushing the envelope. We need to be able to continue putting out innovative products, and ultimately, whether it's a lending business, if we're talking about that, bringing that into the crypto space in a safe and secure manner, in a regulated manner. And so for the SEC to just say no, you can never really stop innovation. It'll still continue. It'll just take place outside of the U.S. in this case, for example, and we see that happening. We see platforms that are just there's this what's called regulatory arbitrage, right, where companies go overseas and start operating from countries with much more lax regulatory oversight regimes. But what ends up happening in that case is then you swing another direction, where companies start operating from places where there is no or very little regulatory oversight. And then again, you have too much risk at this point in time. So we have to have that balance between innovation and making sure we don't stifle innovation, and investor and consumer protection through regulatory oversight.
Does Coinberry hold any plans to become a publicly traded company the same way Coinbase did?
That's a great question. And the answer to that is yes, we do. We are, in fact, looking forward to going public later on this year.
Could you talk a little bit about the decision there? Like, why is this an exciting thing, going public?
Well, we were one of the first platforms. Actually, well, we like to on our end really push the industry forward in Canada. So, like I mentioned, we were one of the first. We were one of the first platforms to register with FinTrack. We are the only platform still to actually provide a service to any government municipalities or any government entities in Canada to allow them to accept taxes paid in Bitcoin. So earlier in 2018, I believe at this point in time, it may have been 2019, we put in place a partnership with a municipality just north of Toronto, which is where we are based, which allows that municipality, the town of Innisfil, to accept payments, tax payments from their residents in Bitcoin. And this is an official partnership that we put in place. And, and this was revolutionary at the time. It was the first time in Canada that it happened. It was one of the first times in the world that it happened. And ultimately, up to this day, the residents of this town still continue to have that option to pay taxes in Bitcoin, and some do. And so, we like to really push this industry forward by going places that sort of nobody's gone before. And so, it's the same thing with being with becoming registered and becoming the first pure play platform to actually be registered in Canada. And it's the same with the Go Public. This will give us an opportunity to become the first platform in Canada to actually be registered, to be publicly traded, and ultimately that will give us an opportunity to grow and to consolidate the industry in Canada and continue pushing it forward as well. So there's a lot of moving parts, but they all come together into giving us an opportunity to provide a better, a more safer, more secure, more convenient platform for Canadians, and then ultimately building upon and developing and rolling out more innovative products, and hopefully the lending business that Coinbase is fighting in Canada as well.
Yeah. Do you have any similar ideas that you might that Coinberry might launch a similar lending product, assuming it can line up with regulations?
We're looking at a number of really, really exciting and innovative products on our roadmap going forward. I can tell you that for sure lending is on that roadmap. I think we'll probably see how it plays out with the SEC, because ultimately, as we look at what's happening in the States, so do the regulators in Canada. And so there are other more, I would say, less contentious and more vanilla products that we can put out before we sort of start fighting the harder battles that we're really excited to put out as well. And whether those are credit products or lending products, or just the ability for our users to stake on the platform. There's other things that we have on the roadmap that we will be focusing on, but ultimately lending is obviously very, very important and in much demand from our user base as well.
Mm-hmm. Were you paying attention to Coinbase stock price on IPO day? Well, I guess it was a direct listing technically, but were you tuned into that when it happened?
Yeah. When they went public, yes. Yeah.
What do you make of it going up in the first minutes of trading and then going way down and still not, even since in present day, still not getting back to that initial spike? Does that mean anything, good or bad?
Look, I think ultimately I look at this from some sort of a long-term perspective, and I'm very bullish and long-term on the industry and on Bitcoin specifically myself. I think what we're going to see is, and we've seen this in Canada in general, right? What happens every halving with the price of Bitcoin, and you see a situation where you have ever decreasing supply and ever increasing demand, and ultimately, as as Coinbase stock is reflective of them operating as a business and their operational capabilities. To a certain extent, it's also a bit of a proxy to the price of crypto in general, and the sort of valuation of the capitalization of the crypto markets. So I think as we see that, as we see ultimately the price of Bitcoin continue to appreciate, and I would venture to say that a big portion of their business is still from the sale of Bitcoin. I would venture to say that their stock price would probably continue to rise in the long term. But was it overvalued from the get-go? Was there a lot of market excitement because they were the first ones to go public in this space, and they're the biggest name to go public? I think we see that happening in a lot of different industries quite commonly. I think it's exciting to see. I mean, not exciting. I think it's a little bit funny to see some people. I think there's a couple lawsuits being launched against Coinbase, saying that they didn't identify all their risks in their filing document.
I unfortunately plead a little bit of ignorance on that. That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, there was a few lawsuits. There was a few lawsuits for letting them trade Ripple as well. That came out. I don't know if anything happened to that, but yeah.
Gotcha. Well, one question that we tend to ask a lot of people on this show is about do you anticipate the price of Ethereum ever flipping the price of Bitcoin?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Flipping. I don't know about flipping. I mean, I think there's a lot. I mean, some of the DeFi projects taking place on the Ethereum network are phenomenal. I think what we're seeing is a bit of competition to the to the Ethereum blockchain kind of evolving. So I would, if I were to bet, I would, my money, I wouldn't say I can see Ethereum flipping Bitcoin, personally.
Gotcha. That's Andrei Poliakov, CEO and co-founder of Coinberry. Thanks for joining us.